Welcome back to the wilds of Brazil. You can see actually these trees right behind me. Those are banana trees. I don't think you can see any bananas hanging from them, but oh yeah, there are some, but you can't see them in the video. Anyway, it's cool, very tropical, even though I'm in the middle of a huge city. It's tropical in here anyway. So far I've behaved as if the information that Facebook stores is all entered by you. In fact, I've said as much. 700 million users all entering their own information. If Facebook had to type that in, they'd fall over because there's no way they could do all of that work. But there's a whole other realm of information behind Facebook and behind almost every large web system that you interact with. And that's the information not about you, but about what you do and about what's happening on the site and what kinds of things are going on. That information is hugely important to Facebook and all the other organizations. In fact, it's the way that they know what to do next. It's the way that they know how it's going, if things are working correctly on their site or not. And it's also the information that they provide back to advertisers to prove to the advertisers that it's worth using their site. So we'll go into it in detail in a moment. But before I do, I want to review a slide that I gave you in a previous lecture about the idea of your unique identifier and all the information associated with it. When you use a site, you type in, when you use Facebook, let's stick to Facebook, when you use Facebook you type in a bunch of information about yourself, your status updates, your city of residence, all that information, that's all tied together by your ID. But there's a lot more information about you on Facebook besides what you type in. For example, what pages you visited, what you clicked on, all that kind of stuff. Now, Facebook may keep that connected to you for their own use. They may anonymize it, as I've said before, for other people's use, but it amounts to a huge amount of stuff. Every time you click, every time you move around on the site, all that's recorded. Okay, so this is where we've been before, the idea that there's some identifier that says it's you. And if they want to anonymize information, they don't necessarily have to take the identifier out of it. They just have to unlink that identifier, maybe use a large random number or something like that, and unlink that identifier from any personally identifiable information. PII is what they call it, personally identifying information. And if you strip out the personally identifying information, things can still be tied together by an ID, but not be tracked backable to you. Of course, somewhere, someplace, Facebook knows that random number is associated with you, or maybe they put in some policies where they actually delete all that information and truly anonymize the information. Okay, so that's the review. Now let's go into the structure of this other data, all the other stuff, the back-end data, the usage data, all of that stuff that Facebook and other large sites are tracking. Okay, the vast majority of this information is coming from something called a weblog. A weblog is a piece of software that runs on a server. Now remember, servers are the page creation machines. Browsers are the page consumption machines, right? You remember that from previously. And so when I say the server for Facebook, I hope you also understand that the server is a big thing. It consists of all these other tiers that we talked about, lots of interacting parts, maybe thousands and thousands of individual computers. But I want to go more abstractly here and just say the server so that we know somewhere on that vast complex of computers is something that is watching everything that happens on the website and logging everything that happens on the website. So one small entry in the log may be a user came to this page at 9:30 in the morning with all the information that comes along with the user coming to the page. And you'd be surprised, but there's a vast amount of information actually that comes. One of those pieces of information, for example, is where you came from. Very useful piece of information to an organization. Where did you come from to get to this page? Did you find it on Google? Did you link from somebody else's site? How did you get here? You can collect all sorts of information just from that. What was the IP address, the individual address of the machine that came to this site? If you can get an IP address, oftentimes you can figure out what location the computer was in, who the user was, what organization it was part of, all this kind of information. So there's a ton of information that simply comes along with the request for the page that gets logged. User came here at 9:30 in the morning, and then all this information about the user, everything that you can find out from the fact that the user came before. I guess I ought to introduce this notion also of a cookie. A cookie is an ID, and we've talked about IDs before. It uniquely identifies you. And when your browser goes to a website, the website, even if it doesn't know who you are particularly, it doesn't have your name or anything like that, it can assign this unique ID, and match it to the IP address. The IP address is the unique address of your computer among all other computers in the world. And it can assign this thing called a cookie, and the cookie is a very large unique ID. And then if you come back again, it can say, I now sense the cookie that I put on your computer because it's also sent back when you go to the page, and it can use that cookie in order to link information from your previous session with your last session. If it weren't for cookies, it wouldn't know who you were from time to time because it can't figure that out. But the use of the cookie is a unique ID that allows the server to link all the different interactions that you've had with the site. Now, on something like Facebook, a cookie is really not that necessary because when you come to Facebook, the first thing you do is log in, so it really does know who you are. But for many other sites where you stay anonymous, where you don't actually ever type in your name and password, a cookie is all they have to figure out who you are and to link the data together. So cookies are unique IDs that a server uses in order to identify a user if they haven't identified themselves. And as I said, on Facebook it's less useful because actually on Facebook I think what they use cookies for is to automatically log you in. Right? So how is it when you go back to Facebook and you've closed all your browsers and you'd opened them again, you go to Facebook and you're automatically logged in, how does it know that it's you that wants to log in? Because Facebook has a cookie on your computer and that cookie is associated with your password or with your user ID and password, and it can automatically log you in. Okay, so back to the point here. We have weblogs running on servers, and those weblogs capture all the information about what's going on in the site. And I've said so far that one of the big things they capture is just information about the computer that just connected to me. What kind of browser is it using? Where did it come from? All this kind of stuff, including a cookie. Okay, what other things what other things get logged on in the web logs? The number of all the links that are clicked get logged. The amount of time that you spend on a page gets logged in a website. If you leave, the last page that you landed on, or the last page that you saw on the site, can also be sensed by the weblog because it has a list of pages that you visited, and then the list ends. That's a useful thing as well. What pages do people drop off of? Now, these things are, as I said, less of an issue for Facebook than they are for sites that are like e-commerce sites. For example, Amazon.com really cares about what your last page was because you went through a bunch of pages and then you left without buying anything. Something they want to know. Okay, so weblogs, a huge amount of data, and you can imagine how much data this is, right? 700 million users all going to Facebook all the time, and every single action that they take on the site is measured. You can also add code behind the scenes, like for example, if I click on a certain friend in my friend list, or I search for a certain person on my friend list, the server can say, oh, when they do this action, put that in the log as well. When I click on an ad, if I take that action, put that on the server in the logs as well. So in addition to the stuff that's logged automatically on the server, I can create other stuff that I want particularly to measure. Okay, so in addition to weblogs, which measure all this stuff, what you clicked on, where you came from, how long you're there, where you leave from, there's also all sorts of other methods of collecting data. I have a few in the slide that you see here. One is, for example, software that runs resident on a computer. If your company really cares about what you do, it can run monitoring software that actually observes every action that you make. So this is different than a server, which is collecting information about a particular website you visit. This is software that collects information about all the websites you visit. Now, this is different a little bit than software that blocks you from going to websites. This is software that's actually monitoring you, and it's kind of a little weird, a little scary. There's also things like the Google toolbar. I bet quite a few of you use the Google toolbar. Did you know that the Google toolbar also sends information about the sites that you visit back to Google? It can give you all sorts of statistics. It's a very useful thing. It gives you the little Google search box all at the same time. But the Google toolbar, at least if you allow it to, sends information about your usage of the internet back to Google. Now, you hope that Google is using that for good aims that you like rather than aims that you don't like, but I'll leave it up to you to decide if you like that and what to do about it. The point here is that a lot of information is collected by things like the Google toolbar. It's a very interesting application. The idea is a company can figure out what parts of the page are more used, what parts of the page are more significant by creating this thing called a heat map. And you can see a heat map in the diagram you see here, and you can see why it's called a heat map, right? It looks like this thing is on fire, and the upper left corner is really blazing. That entire upper region is blazing. Excuse me. And the lower area is pretty cold, right? We go from red to yellow to blue to light blue, and the light blue areas are the least what? They're not the least hot, even though it's called a heat map. They're the least looked at. They're the least observed. They're the least clicked on. They're the least noticed parts of the page. And so right from here you can see a couple of things. First of all is that the top of the page is where all the action is, right? Now we don't know from this heat map whether or not the top of the page is where all the action is because people tend to look there, or the top of the page is where all the action is because that's where all the good stuff is. But I can tell you from experience, the top of the page is where all the people look at because that's just what you do. When you go to a web page, you always scan that top of that page. So how did they collect this data? How do they know where people are looking? Well, a number of ways they can do that. If they have the people in their labs for experiments, they could actually observe their eye movements and they can see where your eyes look on the page. If they don't have that, they could observe things like the number of clicks, per 100 users. For every 100 users, they click, 5 times here, they click no times over here, and they can generate these heat maps that way. Another thing they can do is they can use programs that run inside your browser, JavaScript programs, to observe your mouse movements. The browser is capable actually of observing where your mouse is on the screen and sending that information back to the server so the server can figure out where have you been looking. Okay, so we have server logs, really big way of collecting a lot of data about what you did on the web, what you did on the website. We have software that runs on the server itself, aside from server logs, that notes when you do significant things. And a company like Facebook is using software like that all the time to further figure out what people are doing on their site and to create, as you can imagine, a tremendous amount of data about what people are doing on their site. We have the idea of software that's running outside your browser that a company installs, and this is probably the least frequently used method. It's kind of onerous and people really don't like it, but it's there. And you can create software that can observe what you do and log all the things that you do outside of your browser. And then you can create software that runs inside your browser that allows you to log what people do, where their mouse goes, what they're observing, what they're clicking on, etc., etc. Okay, so all of this amounts to a tremendous amount of data. And then they get all this data. What happens to it? Where does it go? How could they possibly make use of all this data? To understand that, we're going to have to go into this concept of data warehousing and data mining. First, the idea of data warehousing is putting all the data in one big place, just like a warehouse. And I've talked about this before. There's even a vocabulary word on it. Data warehousing is bringing all the data together into one place so that you can compare it and contrast it and you can get at all the data you want. Data mining is then making use, doing something with that data. Just like you mine for ore, you mine for the great nuggets of information that's in this vast amount of server logs and server generated data about what you've done on the site. So the idea here is lots of information coming from lots of different sources, all dumped into this big data warehouse, and then something comes along and analyzes it. So to dive in just a little bit deeper, and we won't go a whole lot deeper than this, but to dive in just a little bit deeper, there's a number of things that have to happen. So first of all the sources of information all have to pour it into the same place, into the same data warehouse. Second big operation is the different sources all have to be made compatible. In one case, there's an IP address, the unique address of your computer. In another case, there's a cookie. In another case, there's actually your user ID and password that's observing this thing. So there's all these different sources from data, and all of those sources have to be made consistent. And that's kind of the process I told you about before of linking all of these different kinds of data all to the same unique ID. In Facebook, that's likely to be your user ID, and all these different sources of data come in, and they're all linked together. They're all from the same person because they're all linked to the same unique ID for that person. Okay, and then the final step is to analyze it, to run reports, to figure stuff out. Now, usually, by and large, in the majority of cases, the reports aren't really about you. Because, you're just not that important as an individual. What you personally did on the website is not that important. What people do on the website is very important. So one report might be, for example, what are the trends in advertising? What sorts of ads do people click on and what sorts of ads don't people click on. Maybe Facebook is running an experiment, and I get one sort of ad for the same product, you get a different sort of ad for the same product, or 100 million people get ad A, 100 million people get ad B, and which one does better? So those are the sorts of reports that we want to run. Those are the sorts of things that we want to find. Those are the nuggets of good information that we want to mine out of the data. Okay, so the idea of data warehousing means bringing all this information in from various sources. In part of the process of bringing it in from various sources is cleaning it up and making sure that all the bits of information that are all about the same person are all comparable. And then there's analyzing it and producing reports. And as I said, most of the reports aren't about individuals. Most of the reports aggregate. Remember that word aggregate, bring together all the information about different individuals to find the great nuggets of information, like, for example, which ad sells the best. Okay, so now you have all the concepts. You have the concept of weblogs, you have the concept of other methods that data can be collected, you have the concept of data warehousing, and you have the concept of data mining. Now the real question, and what you should hopefully have been ready to hear all this time and have been waiting for me to say, so what? What does it mean? What does it do? What's the point? What do I get from it? So there's two big pieces to this. First of all, I want to know what's going on. I want to have a clear indication of what's going on my site. And the second one is I want to know what I should do, how I should make use of this information in order to get to my goals. And generally those goals are going to break down into two parts. Goal number one is make it as good as possible for the user. Goal number two is make it as good as possible for us. Get us what we want from the site. And in the case of Facebook, what we want from the site is revenue. In the case of in the case of most commercial sites, what we want is revenue, and we're going to try to figure out how to get more revenue out of the site. Okay, so let's go into each of those in turn. First of all, I want to figure out what's going on. And in order to figure out what's going on, I'm going to use something akin to a dashboard. And in fact, we call them dashboards in the web world, just the same way that there are dashboards in the real world. So in the same way that your dashboard in your car tells you what's going on, how fast am I going, maybe what direction am I going, is there enough air in the tires, how much gas do I have, all of those different kinds of things that tell you the status, the current status of your car. We have dashboards that tell us the current status of our site. And the dashboard that you see in the picture here is just of that sort. It's one that tells us what's going on right now on the site. And now this is obviously not a dashboard for Facebook. This is a very simple dashboard, and I chose it because I wanted to give you first the simple concept. So this dashboard tells me things like what's the average time people are on the site, how many people have I had today, what's my most popular page, all those kinds of things. So this dashboard is a very simple one, and it's telling me on a minute-by-minute basis what's up with my site, how's it performing at the moment. So when you think about the dashboard, the equivalent dashboard for something like Facebook, you should really think in terms of the difference between the dashboard in your car that one person uses and maybe the control room of a nuclear power plant. If you have that idea in your mind of lots and lots of people looking at lots and lots of indicators all over the place with a vastly more sophisticated and differentiated set of indicators than you'd have in your car. Right? So, first question. What's going on? We have some variety of dashboard or control center that tells us what's going on a minute-to-minute basis, all the things we need to know. And some things you might guess that everyone wants to know is, where are people dropping off? When are they leaving? How long do they stay? What are the big winners? Which pages are most popular? Which things are getting on Facebook? Which things are getting liked the most? Which ads are the most popular? All those kinds of things are telling me what's going on. Okay, we have what's going on, and then there's like, what do I do? So we use this data as well to decide not only what's going on, but what should I do? So in the slide that you're looking at now, you see a little diagram, and that diagram, the little circular diagram, starts with the idea of setting goals. So suppose my goal is to get people to stay longer on my site, or maybe actually let's take one that's much more specific to Facebook. My goal is to get people to friend other people more. Right? That's what drives a lot of Facebook, is the social network. So I want to maximize that social network. I want to get lots of people friending lots of other people. How am I going to do that? Well, first of all, I have to know what's going on. What's the average rate of friending? Like one friend per person per week? Is that the average rate, or one friend per person per 3 days or something like that? I need that dashboard, don't I? I need that control center that tells me like what's the current readout. Then I want to set some goals. I want to say, well, if for this month we want to increase the friend rate by 50%. We want a lot more people. That's unrealistic. They might increase it by 2%, or 1% or something like that, and try various ways to get that to happen. So the first thing I'm going to do going around this cycle is I'm going to set a goal. I'm going to say I want to increase the rate that people friend other people. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure. Part of the measurement is what's going on right now, what's going on historically, and I'm going to match those measurements to things that I did on the site. Maybe for example, now there's a friend list on one side of Facebook, on the left side of Facebook, and there's another friend list on the right side of Facebook. Does that influence the rate at which people friend people? Maybe I'm going to try and create a new algorithm, a new search algorithm for when you type in a name of a friend, getting you to that person. One thing that I've noticed actually on Facebook that could use a lot of help. That particular function of finding somebody is a little, not so great. So I'm going to try to fix that. I'm going to have my engineers work on that, and I'm going to try to fix that, and hopefully that's going to drive the rate of people friending other people up. So I do that, and I measure the results. I measure what happened, and I create these reports, and I may even do a little experiment. I may say, these people get the old method of using the search box to find new friends. These people get the new method, and who created more friends. And on Facebook, I can have lots and lots of data, right? I'm going to collect tremendous amount of data about that. I'm going to measure the results, and then I'm going to create a report. I'm going to say what happened here. The friend rate went way up over the last week, regardless of what I put in the search box. Or the friend rate on the one where I changed the search box, it actually went down a little this week. And the friend rate on the one where I didn't change the search box, it stayed the same. Or the friend rate on the one whatever. I have some report. And then I'm going to go deeper into that report, and I'm going to try to analyze what exactly happened. I'm going to look for not only just I did this intervention and it had this result, but for what kinds of users. I may go much more into detail trying to figure out exactly what the difference was between the ones that worked and the ones that didn't work. So I start with a goal. I want to increase the friend rate. I measure what the friend rate is. I might create various interventions or various experiments. And then I'm going to report on that, and depending on the results, I'm going to analyze and dig deeper in and try to figure out exactly what happened. And from that, I'm going to say, okay, you know what, this new method outperformed the old method a lot, and the friend rate in the people that I gave the new method to, it went through the roof compared to the old ones. So let's put that in for everybody, and now we're going to set a new goal. Let's try to get it up even higher. Let's try to get it to work not only for the 20 to 25 set, but for the 25 to 30 set, for example, years old. So I go round and round the circle, setting goals, measuring my progress against those goals, creating reports that tell me how I'm doing, analyzing those reports, getting deeper and deeper into the report, and then finally creating new optimizations, new interventions, new things that I'm going to do, and going round and round the circle again. And that's how I figure out how to move forward. So, in summary, there's a lot of other data besides the data that you create on sites like Facebook. That data comes from logs, and that data comes from other software running in other places that measures, or not exactly measures, but it notices all the things that you do on the site. That data is put together in a giant data warehouse where all the different sources of data are brought together, and they're all made consistent with each other. And then reports are generated on that, and those reports help us to figure out what to do next. The two major reasons why we do all that stuff is to know what's going on right now, to have that control panel, that kind of way of saying, what's going on at this moment, and also to tell us what to do. And when we're trying to figure out what to do, we go round and round this circle of setting a goal that we want to have happen, and then creating interventions, measuring the results of those interventions, and then based on the results of those interventions, setting new goals.